I am attorney Nicholas Hicks. Welcome back. This is a presentation concerning child custody in the state of New York. You should know that this is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be specific legal advice. You should contact an attorney in the state of New York to see how the laws apply to your particular circumstances. Now, with respect to child custody, after we've established who the parents are, paternity, etc., the law, first of all, presumes that unless there's a court order that says otherwise, the presumption is that both parents have custody of that child. So there's no favoring mom over dad or dad over mom. Again, New York presumes that both parents have custody. Now, of course, as a practical matter, if parents no longer live together, then we have an issue, obviously. Well, where is the child going to live? Who's going to have custody of the child? Now, first of all, we have to sort of separate the different kinds of custody in New York State. And there are a few. There's what we call residential custody, which is it kind of indicates to you by the name of it what it is. That is, where does the child reside? That parent would be the custodial or residential parent of that child. Then you have what is known as joint custody. Now, a lot of people are mistaken by the sound of that. Joint sounds like both parents share residential custody. There are shared residential custody situations, but that is not what joint custody refers to. Joint custody refers to equal decision-making ability with respect to the major decisions in children's lives. So a child can live with one parent, but both parents can share in decision-making ability with respect to major decisions, such as what school is the child going to go to, who is the child's pediatrician going to be, should the child have braces, what's the child's religious upbringing going to be, if any. Those kinds of decisions. Of course, in most instances, the residential parent will make the day-to-day decisions for practical reasons. What time does the child go to bed? Does the child get a haircut? What the child's activities are when the child's at home or with the residential parent. So that's joint custody. And as a matter of public policy, the courts prefer that parents have joint custody because it's just a good thing that parents are able to communicate for the best interest of the child. And so we encourage that. But of course, there are times where, for whatever reason, parents cannot effectively communicate with each other. And when there is a breakdown in communication, then of course, decisions still have to be made. And so in those instances, it may be better that a parent have what's called sole custody. What's sole custody? Sole custody is when a parent not only is the residential parent or has residential custody of that child, but that parent also makes all of the decisions, the major and day-to-day decisions concerning that child. And then in most instances, the other parent only has access or visitation. And sometimes it's necessary for whatever reason. Then there are instances where parents do share residential custody. Sometimes it works. It tends not to be a favorite situation for the courts because you can run into practical problems. For example, the parents live in different school districts, etc. But there are instances where parents will share residential custody. The child may live 3 days with one parent, 4 days with the other. It may rotate. So there are those situations. In those instances, that's not joint custody, that's shared residential custody. So you have residential custody, you have joint custody, and you have sole custody. Those are the primary kinds of custody situations in New York. And there are other situations too, but those are the primary ones that you tend to see. Now, once custody is established by court order, whether it's through family court, whether it's a result of a judgment of divorce that has custody provisions in it. These are all examples of court orders. And so, and when you have a court order, the presumption is no longer there that both parents necessarily have custody. That in that order will probably lay out, or will lay out, who, what kind of custody exists. Now, what if custody needs to be changed for some reason? There's some kind of change in circumstances. Perhaps the child is getting older and decides or wants to live with the other parent. Perhaps there is some situation going on in the residential parent's house that the non-residential parent isn't comfortable with, or doesn't believe that's in the best interest of the child to continue to reside with the residential parent. Maybe parents agree to a different situation. There's a whole host of reasons why one or both parties might believe or may believe that custody needs to be changed. If there is an existing court order with respect to custody, then one or both of the parties have to petition the court seeking a change in the custodial arrangement, a change in custody. And the parent who is seeking the change must demonstrate that there is a substantial change in circumstances that warrant a change in custody. And ultimately, again, the ultimate test in the state of New York, it is what is in the best interest of the child or children. Once the parents are in court, they're obviously given the opportunity to present their various arguments to the court, and sometimes they're able to resolve it themselves, or sometimes it goes to a trial or a hearing, and a judge will have to ultimately decide what is in the child's best interest. Now, just, as a parent myself, if you can avoid a custody battle, I can tell you that you are doing your child a huge, huge favor ultimately. Sometimes it is necessary, but if it can be avoided, if you don't mind me saying, you should avoid it, because it can do an awful lot of damage to children. And parents who don't otherwise get along really don't get along after a full-blown custody trial, just because of the nature, and sometimes the allegations are ugly. It can do a lot of long-term damage. So I would say to you, tread in that area lightly, because the short-term benefit or the short-term perceived benefit sometimes is outweighed by the long-term damage that's done to the family. But again, if it needs to be done, you have to petition the court for a change in custody if there is an existing order of custody. Now, let's talk a little bit about visitation and access, because of course, in most situations, the non-residential parent is going to have some kind of visitation or access with the child. Now, this can be done a number of ways. Of course, it can be done by agreement between the parties, which is always a good thing. It's always better if the parents can agree on anything concerning the child. Communication is good. But of course, if that cannot be agreed on, then again, you should have a court order that lays out what the visitation schedule should be. Now, there isn't one way to handle a visitation schedule. Typically, for example, the non-residential parent may get every other weekend, maybe a night or two, or an evening after school if the child's in school. And parents tend to share weekends or rotate weekends or have every other weekend, because that tends to be the quality time, which is to say, if the child's in school, by the time you do homework and you cook, it's bedtime. It's, for children and parents, the fun time, that sort of more, the time that you have more options to do things, tend to be on the weekend. So parents will often rotate that or share every other weekend, a sort of on again, off again kind of schedule. Holidays can be set up the same way. Holidays can be rotated. One year a parent may have Christmas and the other parent has Christmas Eve, and then it rotates the next year. Child's birthdays can be shared. So again, all that can be laid out in a schedule that's clear, hopefully concise, and doesn't cause confusion, so that parents know what their time is with the child. And most importantly, the child knows when he or she can expect to see their parents. Now, I know I gave you a lot of information in a pretty short period of time, but when we return, we're going to talk about other visitation issues, and we're going to talk about what happens when a parent wants to relocate out of the county or the state with a child, and what the issues are that concerns a relocation. Thank you for joining me. I'm attorney Nicholas Hicks. Join us next time with our next installment of Child Custody.